I was on another level nervous, okay, because it's the first phone call, okay. I mean, big deal. And I really needed that first phone call to go well. I needed it to go well. And you know what she said to me, Corey? The first words out of her mouth were, "I'm so proud of you, Jason." That's what she said. And I just was like, I mean, I almost wanted to cry. It was so, it was so impactful. It really was. And I'll never forget it for the rest of my career. I'll never forget that conversation.
Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for joining the podcast today. If you're an Edward Jones advisor or just an employee financial advisor in general, considering potentially making a move, we have a really, really good podcast today. In my opinion, there's more misconceptions about moving from an employee firm to another firm than any other situation in the industry. And we have a really impressive team today to kind of go through some of those misconceptions and what their experience was making a move from Edward Jones to the independent channel. Today, we have on Jason Barber and Taylor Pankratz that were $500 million multi-generational Edward Jones office that just made a monstrous leap over to open up their very own RIA. Guys, I really appreciate you being on the podcast today.
Thanks for having us, Corey.
Yeah, absolutely. Guys, if you don't mind just talking a little bit about, you guys in general and what your team looked like prior to transitioning to Edward Jones, I think that would be really, really helpful. I think it's a really unique story.
Yeah, so I'll give you some of the background, Corey, on that, and Taylor, feel free to chime in. So, prior to leaving Edward Jones, our family has been long history with Edward Jones, not unlike many others, but we were, as a family, a part of the Edward Jones family for 41 years. Taylor and I's grandfather, Paul Barber, was the first Edward Jones advisor in our small town of Nacogdoches, Texas, and he started the first office in 1981. And we've got all kinds of stories that we could tell you. I mean, we have a picture in the office of our grandfather shaking hands with Ted Jones, and Ted came to visit because he used to do his famous trips around the country and meet all of the brokers. Back then, of course, it was Edward D. Jones and Company. And so we're one of the ones that remembers, what it was like when it was Edward D. Jones and Company. And I actually have a lot of memorabilia that my grandfather kind of saved, thankfully, that has that old logo, the old uptick logo on it, and all of that, which we're really fond of and have a lot of really good memories about that. And so in 1981, he started the first office. Famously, Ted told our grandfather that he had the most production per square foot in the whole firm. His office was very, very small on Main Street in Nacogdoches, and so we're really proud of the legacy that he left. And sadly, Paul passed away in January of this year at the age of 90, and so he wasn't able to see it all the way to fruition. But as far as our transition, but we're really proud of that legacy. And so Paul started in 81, and then Steve Barber, my dad, Taylor's uncle, started with Edward Jones in 1992, I believe is what it was. And then I started in 2011 and Taylor in 2020. Taylor's got some more history that he's going to talk about, as far as, because 2020 wasn't when he got into the industry, but that's when he came and joined our office. Additionally, Taylor's mom, my aunt, works with us and has worked with us in the office for 20 years or more, maybe, I think. And then Debbie Floyd is also part of our office admin staff, and she's been with us for 21 or 22 years, I believe now. And then we had a few others, Claire Bivens and Rachel Hughes. And Rachel, she recently retired, and Claire still works with us today as well. So I don't know, Corey, if there's more that you want me to talk about on that subject, or if you want me to go into more detail, or Taylor, maybe you can share some comments about kind of your history and how you came to be in joining our office.
Yeah, I got into the industry back in 2015. Like Jason said, the family's been in the industry for a while. I was doing oil and gas engineering before that, and was working for Raymond James on the independent channel side, out of a office down in downtown Houston. And kind of in 2020, or maybe it was, yeah, around 2020, Jason and I were talking, and he was kind of saying, hey, why don't you come move back to Nacogdoches from Houston and join the office? And I ended up doing that. It was probably one of the very few advisors that's ever left Raymond James Independent to go to Edward Jones captive broker dealer. So it was it was a different experience than most, probably the different kind of direction than most people go, but it was great. And then it allowed us to kind of figure out what we wanted to do to try to we were just outgrowing our Edward Jones home, and decided we needed to make a change. And so that kind of is where this whole journey starts off.
What's also interesting, Corey, that I'll add a little bit of color commentary to that is a few things. One is that, when Taylor, and it's really just kind of ironic and coincidental how this all happened, but when Taylor left Raymond James to come to us, at that exact same time that was happening, Taylor's, what do you call that, Taylor? Your boss, the person that was running,
like the firm I was with, Claris Wealth Group. He was on the independent side of Raymond James.
And so he was at that exact same time breaking away from the Raymond James independent broker dealer and starting his own RIA at that exact same time. And Taylor can tell the story better, but he was telling Taylor that, all, these are his words, not mine, but all of the top Raymond James independent broker dealer people were breaking away and starting their own RIAs. Right? Mm-hmm. So not literally all, but a significant number of them were doing that. And so I think, we didn't really recognize that at that time, kind of what that might mean for us. But it was very influential, I think, in some of our decision making around, the decision to just launch our own independent RIA.
That's great. So you mentioned it a little bit already, and I'm sure that's one piece, but what were some of the light bulbs that went off through your career at Edward Jones where it made you, just realize that you would have to move on at some point to a more flexible model?
So, thought about this a lot. And, I think that there's sort of two big things that were big light bulb moments for us. One is, this concept of being a business owner. Okay. And that, for 40 years, or, maybe not for me personally, but for our family, I think that it's fair to say that we've always felt like, in maybe not legally speaking, but in spirit anyways, that we were business owners. And so I think that, that has always been something that's like, if you go back even in just my entire history, I've always been and thought of myself as an entrepreneur and a business owner. And I think we just kind of realized probably around the time that Taylor joined the office that just really wasn't the case. Okay. That we really, and part of that, there's a lot of reasons and there's a lot that goes into that we won't touch on today, but I think a lot of it just came down to this concept of that idea of business owner and what you're able to do, what services you're able to offer, how you're able to grow, hire people, how, what you want to pay your people that are part of your team. All these different things that you would normally expect as a business owner that I would have control over and say over, that we didn't in our former model. And when you combine that with what we call the client breakaway movement, there's a lot of people that are familiar with, if you study the industry, are familiar with this concept of the advisor breakaway movement. And, that advisors are in mass, breaking away from the captive broker-dealer model into some form of independence. But what we realized is, and I'm trying to recall the person that kind of coined that term. I don't want to take credit for coining that term, but there's actually a bigger movement going on, and it's the client breakaway movement. In that, I think basically the best way to put it, Corey, is that, when we looked around, and we thankfully didn't lose very many clients, it was pretty rare that we did lose a client. But when we did lose a client, we weren't losing those clients to Merrill Lynch, to Raymond James, to Wells Fargo, to those types of places. We were losing clients to RIAs. Okay. Independent fee only RIAs, because they could offer more services than we could. Okay. And so we realized that that's when I think the light bulb went off, and combining that with Taylor's experience, all sort of led to this concept of that's where clients are going, right? The kind of clients that we want to have, that's where clients are going. Clients are, they're breaking away as well from that captive broker-dealer model.
For sure. So let's dig into that a little bit more. We don't have to discuss like specific Edward Jones items, but if a financial advisor came to you today and they were at an employee firm and they were interested in plugging into the RIA channel, what would you say to them are the things that they would gain by doing so?
Taylor, you want to take that one?
Yeah, so I think the main, there's a handful of differences, of course, and it really depends on kind of which RIA you probably plug into, because they're all really a little bit different, because they're all kind of run how the owner sees fit. But the reality is, the technology at Edward Jones is actually pretty good. A lot of people that work at Edward Jones don't think that, because they haven't really seen a lot of the other options. But having been at Raymond James, having seen a lot of the technology that's out there in these other captive broker dealers, or really even in the independent space writ large, at Ameriprise and LPL, the Edward Jones technology is really pretty good. The downside is they just put a lot of governors on it to where you don't get the full functionality of what it probably can do. But and to really be able to use it across your full book with discretion, et cetera, and stuff. But so if somebody was to plug in the technology, depending on which RIA they plug into, the technology might actually be a step down. And that's something that we are actively trying to build, as a technology that's comparable to what we're used to, but in the RIA world. But compliance is at our previous firm was a huge deal. I mean, a big a lot of time spent on addressing compliance issues that you would, otherwise think are very rudimentary, that you wouldn't think that you need to spend hours upon hours to address. But so I would say compliance is something that a lot of advisors would get a better experience from in the RIA channel than at the captive broker dealers. Like I said, the technology might be a step up or might not, depending on which RIA you plug into. But overall, the value that you can add to clients is really where the difference is made, where you can add alternatives. You can offer people alternatives, private equity, hedge fund offerings, structured notes, things that are out there that when you're in the captive broker dealer, you don't even know exist. And all of a sudden you have this whole other investment menu that's opened up for you, which is a nice value add to clients. And then there's a lot of tax planning and things that most captive broker dealers don't want you to do because of the liability, et cetera, that RIAs typically try to leverage to be a little bit more in-house with their financial planning / tax planning, and how those two things kind of have overlap. And so there's a lot of value that I think advisors that break away look to add to their clients. But I don't know if Jason, you have anything else to add to that?
Yeah, I think that Yeah, exactly, Taylor. I echo everything you said, but I think that, you know, for example, Corey, starting next year, barring something unforeseen, we're going to be launching a tax business to go alongside our kind of like as a sister business, because we've been talking with clients about this, and I mean it's 100% take up almost, where when people have the option and the opportunity for us to be able to truly have it be a one-stop shop where they can get their tax return done, they can get a will drawn up, they can get a trust drawn up, they can get all kinds of services all done in one place, and have that holistic approach to it. It's a really big value add, and so we're really excited about that business. I would say again from a technology standpoint, you know, Taylor kind of touched on this a little bit, but the way we see it is that, and you know, one of the things that you might be wondering, Corey, is like, well, why didn't we just plug into a different RIA instead of, you know, why do we create our own instead of plugging into somebody else's?
Yep.
And I think a lot of it is because, frankly, we figured out that there wasn't anything that was, from a technology standpoint, in line with what we, or, you know, even really close to what we were coming from.
Yep.
Okay. You know, in terms of that. And so we just realized it's like, maybe said it differently, Corey, if what we are creating existed, if what we're creating had it existed at the time, then we would have plugged into that. Okay. We would have much preferred, frankly, to not have to go and reinvent the wheel, you know, but we just felt like it didn't exist. And so therefore we had to go create it. So.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And Taylor, back to what you were saying around compliance, when I'm helping financial advisors explore their options, I just always try to tell them there's a humongous difference between what the SEC and FINRA say you can do as an individual financial advisor versus what companies understand those rules to be and are comfortable policing across 9,000, 10,000, 20,000 financial advisors. And many times in the middle of both of those, you know, there's a lot more flexibility because there's just very broad rules, and firms are a lot more comfortable if there's a couple hundred financial advisors. There's less flexibility, less friction from a compliance standpoint in a bunch of different ways that we could definitely cover in another podcast as well.
Yeah, you know, it's almost like, you know, in the neighborhood, the speed limit might be 30 miles an hour, but then might be speed bumps every 50 feet, right? To just make sure that you don't cross the line in speed. That's a good analogy for how the captive broker dealers run the compliance, is that they have systems built in place that make it impossible to speed, right? Impossible. And the reality is that's nice, except it makes the advisor's life and efficiency really hard to kind of add value to clients, but also answer a whole bunch of emails or you know, whatever you might call it, to, you know, satiate the compliance person that's trying to check a box in their system, right? And so it becomes this battle that you're spending more time answering emails about things that really they're not adding value to the client than you are actually talking to clients. And it's a shame, but that's kind of the monster that is. It's kind of what they've built and what they've become. So, but yeah, so it's interesting.
Just using your analogy and piggybacking on that, almost every conversation I have from a financial advisor that's moving from an employee firm to an independent firm, that's the frustration in one way or another. I'm a financial advisor that's following the rules, and I'm going 35 miles an hour every single day, yet I'm getting treated like, you know, a speeder or a novice driver that is hitting these speed bumps along the way, and it's getting in the way of serving the clients the way that I want to. That's the conversation I almost have every day.
Yeah, and it gets in the way. And when you realize that all of a sudden, when you are at a captive broker dealer, that at the end of the day, you're not a business owner, and you're an employee and you realize that you make one mistake, right? Or or maybe not even a mistake, but you drive 40 miles an hour and a 35, that could all be stripped away from you. Okay. And all of a sudden it's kind of like it's more than just an inconvenience.
So I think one of the biggest misconceptions at Edward Jones and other employee firms as well is, you're not going to bring more than 50% of your assets when you come. Historically, financial advisors do not bring the lion's share of their clients. And me helping over 100 Edward Jones advisors transition from one firm to another, I know that's very much not the case. But would love to hear what your experience was when you transition, what your asset retention was.
So we just crossed a 6-month mark, and we're tracking to be right at approximately 90% after 6 months.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So it's been, I'm not going to sit there and tell you, Corey, that it was easy, by any means, but been probably several months where probably the hardest that any of us has ever worked, really. But not that it didn't have some speed bumps along the way, but that we've been we're proud of the success that we've had, and we're expecting and anticipating that by the time we get to our 1-year anniversary, that we'll probably have be above 100%, and that's not necessarily from old business, but that could be from new business. We're about to launch a pretty significant marketing campaign here shortly that and that's another thing that we're just so excited about, Corey, is the ability to be able to market and differentiate ourselves is really a powerful thing, because where we're from in East Texas, we're not really in a small town per se. I guess it's all a matter of your perception, right? I think our population of our town is around 30,000. And, but if you go to the big cities, if you go to Houston and Dallas and Austin, there's a lot of independent fee-only RIAs there. There might be as many RIAs there as there are broker dealers, maybe more, perhaps. But in our area, we're the only show in town, pretty much, that is truly able to tell clients that we're fiduciaries 100% of the time, that we're truly independent. We're not tied to one particular custodian. We're multi-custodial already, just 6 months in. And we just think that is extremely a very, very powerful differentiator that we're excited to be able to market.
So another misconception that just ties into the last one is just like how important brand is to, successfully building your business, making your clients comfortable doing business with you. I mean, now that you're on the other side of your transition, what would you say to that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that we were no different, going into the breakaway, I would say we were worried about, everybody tells you that you're going to take 80 or 90% of your business, and you don't want to be the outlier, right? You don't want to be the people that take 50% of the business and kind of have this big life-changing event and you fail at it, right? And so what we were stressed about that, because everybody says it's hard to break away from a captive broker dealer because of the brand. Our experience was really that people do business with people that they trust, right? They want to do business with people that know them, that they're used to talking to, right? They don't want to have to get to know a whole new person and have that person get to know them, right? And so I would say that I think that's a misconception. I think that the brand, Jason alluded to it earlier, which is clients are actually breaking away from the captive broker dealers because they're getting a little bit more educated on the fiduciary role, the conflict of interest that exists in those captive dealer models. And so you're actually seeing a kind of a little bit of a different push, which is clients are breaking away from these household name brands am going to name the brands you've never heard of, right? These RAs that you've never heard of. And so because they value the person that they're used to dealing with, that trust, and they want that conflict of interest or that fiduciary aspect that a lot of people can't provide in a captive dealer model. So, you know, it's definitely a concern, but it does need to be something that's preventing, you know, standing in the way of somebody breaking away, because the reality is you can actually leverage that to grow your business at the end of the day. You can sell against that. And so that's something that we're excited about pursuing, and we're seeing a tremendous amount of growth potential just in that by itself.
I think that's a great message. And, you know, we've had this conversation before, but I've never been a financial advisor. I've never transitioned to practice, but I've helped over 500 financial advisors do so. And I've been on the other side of it, you know, as a client, my doctor of 13 years, who I know extremely well, who I have an amazing rapport with, who knows my family. He transitioned from a really big box hospital system here in North Carolina that everybody knows and most people go to open up his own independent place. And when I found out that he left through a letter, you know, I wasn't curious about, do they have the same tools and capabilities, or, you know, what the new firm he went to was all about. It was all about my personal relationship with him. I actually had anxiety because I was like, man, am I going to be able to go with this guy? Am I going to have to build this rapport again with like a complete stranger again? And I just thought that was, you know, really, really powerful. And I know if my financial advisor today left to move to another firm, I wouldn't even blink twice.
That was our experience, you know. We think that it you know, as it is for you and your experience in the healthcare industry, that's the experience that we think exists in the financial industry.
For sure.
So we do think that, you know, one of the questions too, you know, is kind of what should financial advisors ask themselves, you know, when they're thinking about doing this, and sort of the questions that maybe, you know, we asked ourselves going into this as well, is I think that the biggest question people should ask themselves is, are they an employee, or do they think of themselves as an employee, or do they think of themselves as an operator? Are they the kind of person, not just a business owner, but an operator? You know, are they the kind of person that wants to be, you know, and it's not that one is right and one is wrong. It's that there's different levels of responsibility, different levels of control, different levels of customization that come with both of those roles. And I'm sure there's some people that are perfectly content being more of, you know, an employee. All right. And I don't say that in a negative sense. Okay. It's just, it's easier, frankly, to be an employee. A lot of decisions are made for you. Okay. But the consequence that comes with that is that you don't have the customization and control that oftentimes you might want.
Sure. Yeah, that's super helpful. And, you know, there's no right answer for every single advisors. You know, I've been seeing some Edward Jones advisors making a transition to another employee firm. Obviously, there's quite a bit going to the independent broker dealer channel. You know, there's a rare amount of advisors launching their own RIAs like you, but I have seen quite a bit, you know, plug into an existing RIA as well. So there's a lot of different options out there for sure. But so one thing that's rare about you guys, you were basically a team inside of Edward Jones. There's multiple people juggling different responsibilities. You guys had the ability to, you know, act as a team while you did this. What, with the amount of work that, you know, it took to launch your own RIA with multiple people handling different things, would you recommend it to, you know, the typical Edward Jones advisor with 100 million in assets? That's, you know, him and his BOA sitting alone in an office?
I mean, the reality is, I recommend starting your own RIA if you were in that scenario. If you were a single advisor with POA and $100 million, it's just not going. You're going to be better suited plugging it into an RIA in that environment. A lot of people, when they're even thinking about it, the first place they think is, well, I'm going to go to the independent channel, because they don't even think of the RIA channel as really an option. I don't know why that is. It just maybe isn't. They don't see it enough or research it enough before they really make a decision. But they just want it to be turnkey, right? And a lot of RIAs that you plug into can make it turnkey as well. So, but I think what happens is they go to the independent channel, Raymond James or Ameriprise or whatnot, and they outgrow that channel, right? They outgrow it because you've got the same things that they left their captive broker dealer for, compliance issues, technology, whatnot. You have the same constraints at these independent channels where compliance really isn't all that better. In fact, in some ways it can be worse. And the technology, like we talked about, isn't always better. And so they get there and they go, the grass isn't always greener. So then they do what a lot of independent people are doing now, and they're forming their own RIAs. Right. And so they're kind of moving the book twice, having that call their people twice and explaining the whole thing. And it's just like, why would you want to be you want to do that twice? And the reality is they do it because they don't even know if there's a different way. Right. And so the plugging into an RIA, if it's the right one, could be the solution for that $100 advisor that's by himself, because starting the RIA from scratch, I won't say it's impossible for a single advisor to do, but it would be, I'd like to shake that man's hand, because it would be very impressive to try to do that and transition book and all of that. I mean, it would just be a lot. And so I don't see that as practical for the majority of people that are in that scenario. It would be more practical be plugging into the existing RIA that kind of does all the transition support and all that stuff that you want the independent channel to provide you. But then you get the flexibility and freedom of not having to ever move your book again. So I think that's something that's a lot of people, I would call it short-sighted. They just don't even think it's an option because they don't really research it enough. It's hard to research things at the captive broker dealer. It's hard, it's like everything you're doing is you're an employee. You're going to try not to get fired. So you break away. So anyways, that's Jason might have some things to add to that, but that's how I would see it. I would see this very hard and very impressive if you could get RA off the ground by yourself.
Jason, why don't you talk about real quick, like what plugging into somebody else's RIA means, and like what that, what they're outsourcing, so they could just focus more on their clients.
Yeah, for sure, Corey. So yeah, there's a lot of different services and sort of some things that you could think of as table stakes and just are like by default you should expect to get if you plug into an RIA. And then there's some things that are nice, but what you probably will find, or what we found, is that the majority of the existing RIAs that you could plug into, they want to offer you all kinds of services, all kinds of special things. And what you have to realize is that every single one of those things, whether you want it or not, you're paying for that. And so that's one of the things that we figured out, is that one of the reasons we didn't want to do that is it just didn't really make sense for us. And there was a lot of services that were being offered that we just felt like either we could do it on our own, or we just simply didn't need it coming from where we were coming from. But I would say that the main things, Corey, that come to my mind are billing, for example, technology, and being able to have, instead of having to figure all of that out on your own, which I could tell you very plainly is not, like, people don't really respect the difficulty that comes with building your own technology and building your own technology stack. Yeah. I mean, I think we made probably six-figure mistakes on that, frankly. Okay. Mistakes that cost us more than $100,000 because of mistakes that we made building our own technology stack. So I think that there's a lot that goes unappreciated there. So plugging in, of course, you're going to get technology, you're going to get transition support, generally speaking. So somebody that's going to help you figure out, how to get your real estate set up, how to get your legal arrangements set up, how to get legal advice, how to get all of the above that comes, from that standpoint. Billing, cybersecurity is a big thing, you maybe don't realize how significant and how important that is, and how complex and complicated it is to understand, how do you make sure that you have a really rock solid cybersecurity infrastructure. So, kind of our vision, ultimately, to put it in a nutshell, is that what we think the typical, maybe say it like the person that's like us, the entrepreneur, okay, that the entrepreneur that maybe doesn't want to or isn't capable of figuring all of this stuff out on their own, that what they really should be searching for and wanting is somebody that's going to do only the things that you absolutely positively have to have, okay, and only the things, and those few things: billing, cybersecurity, technology, transition support, those kinds of things. Compliance, we didn't talk about that, but that your compliance, that those things should be done very, very well. Okay. But then all of the other bells and whistles, leave that up to that individual person to decide whether or not they want that in their own business. Okay. Because they may decide that they don't want it, and they don't need to pay for that if they don't want it. If they don't want to have a, family office division, or they don't want to have an alternatives sleeve of their business, or a whole division of the RIA that they're plugging into that's dedicated to alternatives, they may say, I don't do alternatives. I don't want to do alternatives. So why should I be paying for that? So there's all kinds of things like that I think are really impactful. So Corey, just to give you a little bit of color to what Taylor was saying, I was told by a broker dealer that also has a RIA division and an independent broker division, that in 2020 that their RIA division had $30 billion of AUM, and today stands at 150 billion. And I asked him directly what he believed the reason for that growth was. And his answer was that the vast majority of that growth has come from people that were with that exact same broker dealer in the independent broker dealer space, doing what we are seeing, and they're moving their book again. All right, they're moving from that independent broker dealer channel into the same RIA division, mainly because of compliance and technology. Okay, and so that's where we think it's so important, this idea of don't move your book twice. Why, there's a very high probability that if you move from a captive broker dealer into the independent broker dealer space, that eventually you will outgrow that as well, and end up having to move your book again. And so we just thought that's largely why we were fortunate, in having Taylor's experience and being able to see that and kind of understand that that's the general trend that's out there in this industry. And so we just figured that we only wanted to do it one time. And so it's funny, there's actually, it's cheesy, Taylor's gonna laugh that I'm even gonna say it, but there's there's an attorney here in East Texas that has a slogan that says, don't get hurt twice, kind of insinuating, like, well, if you got hurt in an accident, don't get hurt financially too, So I look at it as the same idea, don't move your book twice. Why would you do that? It's a very high probability that eventually you'll have to move it twice if you don't make the full leap. But plugging in is sort of the solution to that.
So you talked about technology and compliance as reasons advisors are making a move to the independent channel. what are some of the things from a technology standpoint that have like truly just blew your mind, like making a move to the RIA side that you feel like other advisors should know about?
Well, to be very frank, Corey, I mean, I think that where we used to be, it's really, it's been very eye-opening in that, you know, when we first made the move, I think that we really discounted how good the technology was at our previous firm. It really, in a lot of ways, is good technology, very well integrated. Okay. But as we talked about, just with a lot of restrictions on it in terms of how you're actually able to use that and how efficient you can be and things of that sort. It's kind of a lowest common denominator, you know, type thing. So everything is got governors on it, and you're not able to go you know, very fast or use it, you know, in a way that maybe you would want to. So I think that from a technology standpoint in our world now, I think the things that were the most eye-opening were that, you know, if I could be very frank, that a lot of the technology that exists is just plainly not all that great. Okay. You know, that's out there, you know, that exists, that you hear about and that you read about and that people rave about how good it is. It is very unintegrated, very, you know, not doesn't communicate well together, you know, and so we're really excited about a platform that we're going to be launching here pretty soon that we call Holistic View, that ultimately, as I referenced a little bit ago, you know, we had to spend over 6 figures kind of learning that mistake ourselves. One of the biggest mistakes we made was signing long-term contracts with companies before we really understood, you know, whether we would like it or not, frankly, you know, and so so we learned that mistake, and we're launching our own platform that we're really excited about, that we think is the best thing that we've seen, and we've seen it all, you know, from a technology standpoint. So I would say, you know, some things that come to mind though that are major improvements from a technology standpoint. You know, one thing that we're really excited about is our ability now for people that have very basic estate planning needs, that we're able to leverage technology to actually use attorneys through technology to deliver and actually produce estate planning documents. We're not producing the documents, but these attorneys that exist inside of this technology platform are able to actually produce trust documents, wills, powers of attorney, et cetera. And so that's something that I think is really a very exciting development. I'm trying to think, you know, Taylor, if there's anything else. You know, we're really fond of our risk tool, Nitrogen. You know, we really feel like that has taken our conversations with clients about their risk tolerance and risk number and setting really good expectations around that. You know, many people in the independent space, I'm not sure if in the independent broker dealer space, but in the independent space are very familiar probably with Nitrogen, what is formerly called Riskalyze. But we've had really tremendous response, I think, with that tool, and helping people to just be able to actually give themselves a number and not just be, well, you know, you're a low risk, you're a medium risk. Well, you know, what does that mean to me? And understanding that not all stocks are the same. You know, investing in Tesla stock is a another different level of risk than investing in Coca-Cola stock, for example. But you know, in the technology that we were using, for the most part, would consider those to be very similar type stocks. They're both large cap stocks, but the reality is they're on a totally different scale in terms of volatility, for example. So
guys, I mean, knowing what you know now, would you have made the transition to independence earlier than you did?
Knowing what we know now, I think the answer is 100% yes. There's just, at the end of the day, we feel like, and we've told a lot of people that there's a lot of great things about Edward Jones, and we have a ton of friends and a lot of love for the firm and long history. But at the end of the day, we just had outgrown the firm. It's just that simple. And so we just feel like ultimately the growth potential that we have is just on another level. And so we're really, we're excited about it and wish we would have done it 10 years ago.
Yeah, and I think your transition numbers definitely, speak for themselves in terms of asset retention. Look, I've never transitioned to practice before, and I've never had my own practice. I've never transitioned to practice, but I've helped over 500 financial advisors transition their practices in the past. And I was working with a Merrill Lynch advisor a couple months ago, another team right around your size, and he was spending so much time focusing on what he was going to say to his clients. And he had these bullet points and he was having these 30-minute conversations, and literally 10 times he called me and said, my client literally cut me off halfway through and said, Austin, we love you, man. We're coming with you. And I think advisors sometimes underestimate the value that they bring to their clients every day. I tell clients the story all the time of when my doctor of 12 years left a huge big box firm and made a move to a small independent place. And when I found out that he moved, I wasn't concerned about the other company that he was starting or if they were going to have the same test machines and capability. I actually had anxiety that I wasn't going to be able to go with him. This guy knows me. He knows my family. I trust him. And I didn't even blink twice about going with him.
Right. Yeah. So I would encourage people to lean into that. That's going to be their experience too, right? Because that's why the numbers are so high. That's why it's 80 or 90%. It's just a fact.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I want to tell you a story real quick, Corey, and hopefully this hopefully it comes out the right way. So I was going to tell you the story about the very first person that I called and told that we left. And because as you know, there's a lot of rules, and we followed all the rules to the T, okay, about what we were allowed to say, how we were, we didn't bring any client's contact information with us. We found it all on whitepages.com and all of that. So we played by the rules. So the very first client, I found her phone number on whitepages.com, picked up the phone, called her, and told her that we had resigned. And do you want to know what the first thing, I was on another level nervous, okay, because it's the first phone call, okay. I mean, a big deal. And I really needed that first phone call to go well. I needed it to go well. And you know what she said to me, Corey? The first words out of her mouth were, "I'm so proud of you, Jason." That's what she said. And I just was like, I almost wanted to cry. It was so, it was so impactful. It really was. And I'll never forget it for the rest of my career. I'll never forget that conversation. So, and that's how a lot of these calls went. That's how a lot of them went. The only challenge was just finding the contact information. So but beyond that, the calls were very very professional, very short, and as like we said, the numbers don't lie. That as scary as it was. And it was very scary, and I'll never forget that. When we're talking to other advisors that at captive broker dealers that are thinking about doing this, I'll never discount that fear, because that was another level of fear. Taylor and I'm sure we'll never forget it either. So it is a very, very scary thing, but you just have to ultimately have faith that whatever happens, it's going to work out, right? For better or worse, one way or the other, it's going to work out. And so I kind of, drew an analogy, Corey, when we were doing this, is that I said, I'm a person of faith. And I said, it was kind of like when Peter was on the boat and he saw Jesus, and he got out of the boat and walked on water. Right. And it was kind of like, you don't know whether you're going to sink or not. Right. But you just kind of have to have that kind of faith that at the end of the day, you're going to be okay. And so that was what it was like for us. It was really scary, but ultimately we think we've succeeded.
That's amazing to know. So I mentioned earlier in the call, it's pretty rare for an Edward Jones advisor to go out there and take the Herculean effort that it takes to, open up their own RIA. And you guys, had some help. You were a team, and you can split up responsibilities and do all of and split that effort in half. What would you say to a typical Edward Jones advisor, where it's just one financial advisor in an office moving by himself, maybe with his BOA? What would you say to them launching their own RIA?
Yeah, I would say, having done it, I can say I would not recommend trying to do it by yourself. I think that would be, it's possible, but it would be like you alluded to, a Herculean task to successfully transition, your book and have all your I's dotted and T's crossed on all the things that you would need to do to actually even be able to function as an RIA in the first 6 months. It would be a lot. And so I would say the best bet for an advisor in that scenario would be plugging in to an existing RIA, and preferably one that's built for, in a way that's kind of suited for that advisor, right? The technology kind of looks the same. You don't have this, you're getting a lot of the compliance technology and billing and all the transition support that you want, but you're not having to reinvent the wheel. And I think that's something, like Jason alluded to, we would plug into this RIA that we've got. We would have plugged into it if it had existed. We looked at a lot of RIAs that we could have plugged into, and unfortunately they just weren't built for what we were used to seeing on a day-to-day basis from a technology perspective. And so that was kind of the deal killer, right? Because that's what you're going to be living in every day. So ultimately, you either go to the independent broker dealer, right, and you transition to the independent broker dealer, and then you outgrow that eventually, and you have to move your book again, or you just move your book once, right? And only have to make these transition calls one time to the clients. And I mean, I'm somebody that had to move. I moved my book twice. Wouldn't recommend it, right? I moved it from Raymond James Independent, Edward Jones, and then now I'm moving it from Edward Jones to the RA. And it's not something like, it's not ideal, right? And so having done it, I can tell you, you don't want to do it. And if there was a solution for an advisor that's at the captive broker dealer to plug into an existing RIA that's suited for them and built specifically for them, I think that's a recipe for success for that advisor. I can't imagine starting your own RIA by yourself with you and an assistant. That would just be tremendous task.
Without a
Yeah,
doubt.
especially because you can't talk to your assistant ahead of time, right? So they don't know ahead of time.
Come with you.
Yeah, you don't even know if they're gonna come with you.
Yeah.
You genuinely don't. And so I mean that was our experience is that no one knew. And so that's a big thing. But yeah, we very much feel like that there's a major misconception right now. And Corey, you might even disagree with me, I don't know. Okay, and that's okay if you do, but I think there's a major misconception in the industry about what independence really is. And we just feel like at the end of the day, the industry, and if advisors, I know I speak for myself in that I don't know, prior to undertaking all of this, if we even understood, or I even understood what an RIA even was, frankly. Okay. But I just think that there's a lot of folks that think about, when they think about the independent broker dealer channel, they think of that in their mind as that's kind of like that's independent. And we just think that at the end of the day, if people understood, the way, or thought about it the way that we think about it, that at the end of the day, the only real answer is, at the end of the day, true independence is owning your own ADV, frankly. Okay, that's true independence. And while that's a really, really challenging thing to achieve, as we just talked about, for a number of people to be able to do that, the closest thing that you can get to that is plugging into a fee-only RIA. And so we haven't talked much about that, but that is one thing that we also really thought long and hard about and are really excited about, is the idea of being fee only. And, you know, I don't know, Corey, what your opinion is on that, you know, as far as if you know, the idea of from a compliance standpoint, not having FINRA on your back anymore, and not having insurance licenses, and not having any of those kinds of requirements, is a very freeing feeling. You know, it really allows us to really put the client's interest first, and to be able to say with full conviction to our clients that we work for them, we work for no one else. You know, that we're only paid by them. We're not paid by anybody else. You know, it's a very, very freeing, very pure relationship. And we think that that's what the future is of the industry. And so, you know, we just, you know,
but it also doesn't mean that you just lose all the commission, you know, all your annuities and all of these things just stay where you were, right? There's outfits that help you move those annuities and those insurance products so that you can still service them. You just can't get paid directly from those products anymore. So that, you know, it's not like you have to just say goodbye to all these other all those assets that you might have in a commissioned environment. But there is something special about being fee only and not having FINRA regulations and things. It's just the client's workload is tremendously less, and it allows you to spend more time doing what you actually want to do, right? Which is service your client. That's the whole point of this whole thing. So it's definitely what we recommend you do, right?
Guys, I really appreciate the time. You've obviously built a fantastic business. You know, took the risk, and obviously it's, you know, really paid off, and you've, you know, built something really, really great. I really appreciate the time, and thank you so much again.
Thanks, Corey.
Thanks for having us, Corey.